Spring 1945. Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. The American Guard's steel blue eyes watched the German woman's careful movements as she scrubbed the mess hall floor. Her blonde hair tucked neatly beneath a kerchief, her hands red from hot water. 2 weeks earlier, she had been Helferinnen Leutnant Elsa Mueller, a signal specialist with the Wehrmacht's elite communications corps. Now she was simply prisoner 24601, one of 3,289 female German military auxiliaries captured by Allied forces during the final European offensive. The distance between them, precisely 12 feet of polished linoleum, represented an unbridgeable chasm of nationality, language, and opposing military service. Yet Second Lieutenant James Miller found himself noticing the methodical efficiency with which she worked, a professional competence that transcended her current status. This moment, unremarkable in official records, contained the first seeds of what military historians would later document as one of the most unexpected psychological phenomena of the prisoner of war experience, genuine human connection forming across enemy lines. The Nachrichten Helferinnen, female signal auxiliaries, constituted the backbone of German military communications from 1939–1945. These women, predominantly aged 19 to 24, operated complex field telephones, Enigma coding machines, and radio transmission equipment. Unlike other German women's auxiliary units, they received military rank, wore Wehrmacht uniforms, and took the same oath of personal loyalty to Adolf Hitler as male soldiers. Military intelligence files confirm that 42,000 such women served with German forces, approximately 8% of total signals personnel. These women, thoroughly indoctrinated through Nazi education programs, expected execution or sexual violence upon capture. Wehrmacht briefings had warned them that American soldiers, characterized as undisciplined criminals and racial mongrels, routinely violated female prisoners. Nazi propaganda films showed staged scenes of brutalized German women in Allied captivity. Diaries confiscated during processing revealed that many contemplated suicide rather than surrender. Instead, they encountered standardized military processing, delousing showers, medical examinations, fingerprinting, and assignment to gender-segregated facilities. American medical records from Fort Oglethorpe document that arriving female prisoners averaged 15 pounds underweight, suffered vitamin deficiencies, and showed signs of psychological strain from constant aerial bombardment. They received the same 3,000-calorie daily rations as male prisoners, hospital treatment for medical conditions, and standard Red Cross parcels. The WAC facility at Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, originally built to train American servicewomen, housed 1,652 female German prisoners by May 1945. The grounds covered 42 acres, with 12 barracks buildings, a central mess hall, infirmary, administrative offices, and recreation fields. Military police records indicate a guard complement of 175 personnel, including 43 female MPs specifically assigned to female prisoner areas. Initial interactions proceeded with formal distance. Language barriers reinforced separation. Fewer than 15% of the guards spoke basic German, while approximately 22% of the Nachrichten Helferinnen had studied English. The women brought technical expertise. 89% were proficient Morse code operators, 74% could operate field telephones, 63% were trained in basic cryptography, skills that had recently directed artillery strikes against American positions. Yet within this framework of official enmity, individual perceptions began shifting almost immediately. Elsa Mueller noted in her subsequently declassified debriefing, "The American guards were not what we expected. They did not look at us with hatred." This confusion about American attitudes began our education. Military psychologists would later identify this cognitive dissonance, the gap between Nazi depictions of Americans and observed reality, as the critical first stage in psychological reorientation of German prisoners. For Lieutenant Miller, watching prisoner 24601 methodically clean the floor that spring morning, the war's human dimension was becoming uncomfortably visible. The German propaganda stereotype of fanatical Nazi women dissolved with each precise movement of her brush, revealing something more complex. A human being wearing an enemy uniform. The Women's Army Corps facility at Fort Oglethorpe presented a reality that contradicted everything the Nachrichten Helferinnen had been taught to expect. Barracks originally designed for American servicewomen now housed German prisoners, providing 48 square feet of personal space per woman, 4 times the allocation in late-war German military quarters. Each prisoner received an individual steel-frame bed with mattress, 2 wool blankets, sheets changed weekly, and a footlocker for personal belongings. Military requisition records confirmed that Fort Oglethorpe prisoners had access to hot showers daily, unlike German civilian women who often went weeks without bathing in besieged cities. The mess hall served 3 meals daily, totaling 3,200 calories, double what German civilians received during the final months of the war. Breakfast typically included eggs, cereal with milk, bread with butter and jam, and coffee with sugar. Dinner featured meat, vegetables, potatoes, fruit, and dessert. The contrast between American abundance and German wartime deprivation created profound psychological impact. As one prisoner wrote in a censored letter home, "I am ashamed to tell you how well we eat while you suffer. Yesterday they served ice cream. I had forgotten such things existed." Military Police Detachment 1601, responsible for camp security, operated under specific directives regarding female prisoners. Quartermaster records from April 1945 document the official policy. Female enemy combatants will receive treatment identical to male prisoners of war in accordance with Geneva Convention protocols, with additional accommodation for gender-specific requirements. The 43 female MPs supervised intimate spaces, barracks, showers, and medical examinations, while male guards patrolled perimeters and supervised work details. Army Regulation 30-2290, dated November 1944, explicitly prohibited fraternization between guards and prisoners, stating, "Military personnel will maintain formal professional distance from enemy prisoners at all times. Conversation limited to essential communication, personal interaction, gift exchange, or socializing strictly forbidden. Violation carried penalties, including reduction in rank, forfeiture of pay, or court-martial." Yet official logs from Fort Oglethorpe indicate 17 documented reprimands for excessive familiarity with prisoners during May-July 1945 alone. Second Lieutenant James Miller, 24, from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, had been assigned to Fort Oglethorpe after recovering from shrapnel wounds received during the Battle of the Bulge. His medical classification, limited service, non-combat, placed him in the Prisoner Processing Division, where he supervised work details and managed prisoner requests. Military personnel files describe him as reliable, efficient, demonstrates appropriate authority without unnecessary harshness. His basic German vocabulary, approximately 200 words learned during combat deployment, exceeded most guards' capabilities. Prisoner 24601 Elsa Mueller, 22, had served with Signals Regiment 17, attached to the Wehrmacht's 9th Army. Captured during the collapse of German positions along the Elbe River, her personnel file noted cooperative behavior, excellent English language skills, no disciplinary infractions. Camp administration assigned her as barracks translator, responsible for communicating regulations to fellow prisoners. This position created legitimate reason for regular interaction with Lieutenant Miller, who served as work detail coordinator. Their first substantive conversation occurred during work assignment distribution. Muller's request for kitchen duty rather than laundry service required Miller's approval. Military records document their official interaction in precisely 27 words. Request approved due to prisoner's prior food service experience and vacancy in kitchen detail. Replacement needed for laundry assignment. What records don't capture is Miller's momentary pause when he noticed the small scar above Muller's right eyebrow, or Muller's fleeting smile when he approved her request in accented German. Camp routine established predictable patterns. Mueller reported to Miller's office each morning at 0730 hours to receive daily work assignments for her barracks. Their official interactions lasted approximately 4 minutes daily. Yet these brief moments developed subtle patterns. Her gradually improving English, his tentative German phrases, the careful maintenance of official distance undermined by growing mutual recognition. Neither could have articulated the invisible thread forming between them, connecting two people whose nations remained, technically, at war. The camp's daily routines created countless small intersections between guards and prisoners. Kitchen duty placed Mueller in the mess hall 6 hours daily, preparing meals alongside 4 American cooks and 7 German prisoners. The shared workspace measured approximately 800 square feet, with industrial stoves, preparation tables, and washing stations arranged in efficient proximity. This physical closeness necessitated coordination and communication. Lieutenant Miller's responsibility for work detail supervision brought him to the kitchen 3 times daily for inspections. These professional interactions followed strict protocols. Military records document 1,427 work orders processed through Miller's office during May 1945, each requiring his signature and prisoner acknowledgement. Yet within these formalities, human connection emerged through small, unrecorded moments. Mueller correcting Miller's pronunciation of Kartoffeln as he inspected potato peeling. Miller explaining baseball scores in the newspapers used to wrap kitchen waste. Brief exchanges, officially meaningless, created incremental understanding. Language acquisition accelerated through necessity. Camp administration established optional English classes taught by Red Cross volunteers 3 evenings weekly. Attendance records show Mueller attended 42 of 45 sessions between May and August 1945. Lieutenant Miller, meanwhile, borrowed a German grammar book from the camp library, checking it out 7 times, according to circulation records. Their conversations evolved from single words and gestures to simple sentences, then to increasingly complex exchanges. Food preparation created unexpected cultural bridges. The kitchen staff received permission to incorporate German recipes into the meal rotation once weekly. Mueller taught American cooks to prepare sauerbraten and spätzle, while learning American methods for baking pies and cookies. These culinary exchanges represented larger patterns developing throughout the camp system. Army field reports from multiple POW facilities noted increasing cultural osmosis as captivity extended from months to years. On May 7, 1945, news of Germany's unconditional surrender reached Fort Oglethorpe. Camp records document the announcement made at 0900 hours over the public address system, first in English, then in German. Medical logs note 11 German prisoners required sedation for extreme emotional distress. 3 attempted suicide. The psychological impact manifested physically. Camp infirmary visits increased 82% during the 2 weeks following surrender. Mueller's reaction, documented in a psychological evaluation dated May 10th, displayed remarkable composure. The interviewing psychiatrist noted, "Subject exhibits minimal distress, acknowledges Germany's defeat as inevitable for many months, expresses concern for family in Dresden but no continued allegiance to Nazi ideology." This psychological stability marked her as unusual among her cohort, where 68% expressed continued faith in ultimate German victory despite surrender evidence. Throughout May and June, Lieutenant Miller observed profound transformation among the prisoners. Military intelligence reports tracked this evolution through monitored mail and conversations. Initial denial gave way to shock, then to grief as photographs from concentration camps appeared in newspapers. The ideological foundations that had sustained these women through war collapsed completely. An intelligence officer noted, These prisoners are experiencing total worldview destruction. Their national identity, political beliefs, and future expectations have simultaneously disintegrated. For Mueller, this period brought unexpected clarity. During a routine work assignment meeting, she asked Miller about her family's prospects in Soviet-occupied Dresden. Their conversation, officially restricted to 3 minutes, extended to 15. Camp logs note: Lieutenant Miller provided appropriate information regarding occupation zones and civilian communication channels. Unrecorded was Mueller's whispered Danke as she left, or Miller's response: Gern geschehen. You're welcome. As spring warmed to summer, the relationship between prisoner and guard evolved through hundreds of small interactions. Miller began leaving German-English dictionaries accidentally in the kitchen. Mueller returned them with vocabulary lists tucked between pages. During a July thunderstorm that knocked out power, witnesses reported seeing them sitting 6 feet apart on the mess hall steps, talking by flashlight about their hometowns. The distance between them remained physically appropriate, but psychologically, boundaries were blurring with each conversation. Victory in Europe fundamentally altered the status of German prisoners held on American soil. War Department Directive 74-5-22, issued June 12, 1945, reclassified German POWs from enemy combatants to surrendered enemy persons, a bureaucratic distinction with practical implications. Work release programs expanded from essential agricultural labor to include positions in food processing, textile manufacturing, and local government maintenance. Military police escorts for prisoner work details decreased from 1.5 ratio to 1:12. The 6-foot minimum distance requirement between guards and prisoners, strictly enforced during active hostilities, became increasingly theoretical. At Fort Oglethorpe, this policy shift manifested in multiple ways. Recreational activities previously segregated by nationality became integrated. Camp records document joint volleyball matches, chess tournaments, and musical performances beginning July 1945. The camp newspaper, the Oglethorpe Observer, began publishing bilingual articles with contributions from both American personnel and German prisoners. A cultural exchange program initiated by the YMCA brought weekly films, lectures, and concerts that guards and prisoners attended together in the camp auditorium. For Mueller and Miller, these relaxed regulations created new contexts for interaction. Camp activity logs show both participated in a mixed choir that rehearsed twice weekly, preparing German folk songs and American spirituals for a September performance. The mess hall's evening coffee service, instituted in August, provided 45 minutes of unstructured social time where conversation could extend beyond work-related matters. A fellow prisoner later recalled, Elsa would sit at the corner table with her English grammar book. The lieutenant would arrive precisely 22 minutes after service began. They maintained appropriate distance, but spoke with an intimacy obvious to everyone. Their growing connection did not go unnoticed. Security logs dated August 17th. Note: Lieutenant Miller counselled regarding excessive time spent with prisoner 24601 during mess duty inspection. No disciplinary action taken. 2 weeks later, a second entry. Lieutenant Miller reassigned from kitchen duty supervision to perimeter security. Recommended distance from prisoner interactions. This official intervention temporarily separated them, but ultimately provided unexpected opportunity. Perimeter duty included monitoring the recreation field during evening hours, precisely when the women's choir held outdoor rehearsals. Letters became their primary communication method. Mueller's position as barracks translator gave her access to the camp mailroom, where outgoing correspondence was censored. She developed a system using officially approved letters to her fictional cousin in Pennsylvania. Military censors, overwhelmed with processing thousands of letters weekly, missed the pattern of phrases that Miller had been instructed to watch for in the camp's public newspaper. His responses, similarly coded, appeared in the classified advertisements section that prisoners were permitted to read. Their first physical contact occurred during a September thunderstorm. Mueller, returning from choir practice, slipped on rain-slicked stairs. Military incident reports document. Prisoner 24601 sustained minor abrasions when falling near south entrance. Lieutenant Mueller provided first aid assistance before medical personnel arrived. The report doesn't mention their hands touching for 17 seconds, or the whispered exchange that no one else heard. October brought crisis. Mueller's repatriation papers were processed, scheduling her return to Germany on November 15th. The notification arrived during morning roll call, a single sheet of paper that realigned their universe. Camp processing logs show Mueller requested emergency leave the same day, citing family matters requiring immediate attention. His request was approved for October 12, 14, during which time he travelled not to Pennsylvania, but to Washington, D.C., where State Department records show he inquired about immigration procedures for German nationals. Upon his return, Mueller received formal reprimand for activities inconsistent with military discipline. A fellow officer had reported seeing them in conversation behind the supply building, standing approximately 18 inches apart. The disciplinary record states, Lieutenant Mueller reduced one rank to second lieutenant, reassigned to administrative duties effective immediately. No contact with prisoners permitted. Mueller simultaneously lost her translator position, reassigned to laundry detail on the opposite side of the compound. Their separation lasted exactly 17 days. On November 2nd, Mueller submitted his resignation from military service, effective upon completion of required processing. The document, preserved in Army personnel archives, cited personal reasons of a private nature for his decision to leave the service. His final day at Fort Oglethorpe was November 14th, precisely one day before Muller's scheduled repatriation. The repatriation process for female German POWs began systematically in November 1945, with priority given to those from regions under Western Allied control. Transport ships converted from wartime troop carriers now returned former enemies to a homeland transformed by defeat. The USS General W.P. Richardson departed Newport News, Virginia on November 16th, carrying 212 female prisoners, including Mueller. Military transport records document austere but adequate accommodations. Canvas bunks in converted cargo holds, 3 meals daily, limited deck access during daylight hours. The 9-day Atlantic crossing provided ample time for prisoners to contemplate the uncertain futures awaiting them. Upon disembarkation at Bremerhaven on November 25th, returning prisoners encountered a Germany rendered almost unrecognizable. Approximately 70% of urban housing had been destroyed by Allied bombing. Food rations for German civilians averaged 1,200 calories daily, barely above starvation level. The American occupation zone implemented denazification procedures requiring extensive documentation and interviews before former military personnel could receive civilian status and ration cards. Muller's processing took 27 days. Her Nachrichten Helferinnen service requiring additional security clearance despite her POW re-education certification. Simultaneously, former Lieutenant Mueller navigated the labyrinthine bureaucracy of post-war immigration policy. The War Bride Act of 1945 provided expedited naturalization for spouses of American military personnel, but specifically excluded former enemy nationals. State Department records show his first formal inquiry regarding Mueller's immigration status on December 12, 1945. The response, a form letter citing Immigration Act Section 326B, stated, "Persons who served in military forces of nations at war with the United States remain ineligible for visa consideration for minimum period of 24 months following cessation of hostilities." Their correspondence during this separation required extraordinary persistence. The American occupation zone permitted civilian mail, but subjected it to military censorship. The Soviet-controlled sector where Mueller's family resided in Dresden allowed no direct Western communication. Their solution involved an elaborate relay system. Mueller wrote to a former German POW repatriated to Munich, who forwarded letters to Müller's cousin in the American sector of Berlin, who then arranged transport to Dresden through black market channels. A complete exchange required approximately 38 days. Müller's January 1946 letter, preserved in Müller's personal papers, described post-war German reality. Dresden is a skeleton city. We receive 150 grams of bread daily, sometimes potatoes, rarely meat. Coffee is ground acorns. Americans cannot imagine such hunger. My family survived the firebombing in a root cellar. Our apartment building is rubble. 7 families now share a 3-room flat with no running water. I teach English to occupation officials for extra rations. The contrast between American abundance she had experienced in captivity and German deprivation in freedom created psychological whiplash. Müller's strategy for reunification required systematic determination. Immigration records show he secured employment with the American Occupation Administration in Frankfurt in March 1946. His military experience and basic German providing necessary qualifications. The position placed him 280 miles from Dresden, but within occupation authority. He arranged transfer of $147 monthly from his $210 salary to support Müller's family through official channels, documenting these transactions as humanitarian assistance to war victims rather than personal support. Their first post-war meeting occurred on June 12, 1946, at an occupation checkpoint between American and Soviet zones. The military police log notes, Civilian Mueller, occupation ID were 4721, authorized 30-minute transit meeting with German National Mueller, meeting observed by MPs as per regulation. The report doesn't capture Mueller's shock at Müller's civilian clothes, or his reaction to her gauntness. She had lost 18 pounds since repatriation. Immigration hurdles remained formidable. Mueller submitted formal sponsorship application in September 1946, initiating a process requiring affidavits of support, character references, security clearances, and medical examinations. State Department files contain 17 separate appeal letters between October 1946 and June 1947, each meticulously addressing specific regulatory concerns. His persistence represented statistical rarity. Official records document only 201 approved immigration applications for former German military personnel between 1945-1948, with female auxiliaries constituting just 14 cases. Elsa Mueller arrived at New York Harbor aboard the SS Washington on October 17, 1948. Immigration processing at Ellis Island took precisely 8 hours and 42 minutes, her paperwork marked with the rare designation, Former Enemy Alien, Cleared. James Mueller waited at the terminal, holding a small American flag and a bag containing an apple, a Hershey bar, and a bottle of Coca-Cola, symbolic first tastes of American abundance. The terminal's wooden benches, worn smooth by thousands of immigrant reunions, now witnessed another unlikely outcome of global conflict. Former enemies becoming family. Their marriage certificate, filed in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania on November 3, 1948, lists her occupation as translator and his as insurance adjuster. The Methodist ceremony, attended by 27 guests, represented the convergence of seemingly incompatible worlds. Miller's parents hosted the reception at their Victorian home on Chestnut Street, where neighbors viewed the German bride with curiosity rather than hostility. Local newspaper coverage described her as a charming European refugee rather than former enemy military personnel, a deliberate omission reflecting post-war social recalibration. Adjustment to American civilian life progressed in measured stages. Mueller used his GI Bill benefits to complete an accounting degree at Franklin and Marshall College. Mueller enrolled in secretarial courses at Lancaster Business School, her English skills advancing from functional to fluent. They purchased a modest Cape Cod home on Arlington Street in 1950, making 25 years of mortgage payments at 4.5% interest. Their integration into post-war American prosperity proceeded alongside approximately 18,000 other German war brides who arrived between 1947 and 1950, creating an unexpected demographic bridge between former enemies. Community acceptance varied geographically. Lancaster's substantial Pennsylvania Dutch population, maintaining German language and traditions, provided cultural familiarity. The local Lutheran church welcomed Mueller despite lingering war resentments. When their first child was born in 1952, 17 neighbors attended the christening reception. Yet subtle barriers remained. Mueller's application to join the Daughters of the American Revolution received no response, and certain social invitations mysteriously excluded them. These experiences mirrored broader patterns documented in sociological studies of German war brides, who reported 78% positive community integration, but 62% experienced occasional discrimination. Their relationship represented a microcosm of larger historical reconciliation. As Cold War tensions intensified, West Germany transitioned from defeated enemy to crucial NATO ally. The Marshall Plan invested $1.4 billion in German economic reconstruction between 1948 to 1952. Former adversaries became strategic partners united against Soviet expansion. The Miller family, like countless others, embodied this geopolitical realignment at human scale. A 1975 doctoral study by Columbia University identified 201 marriages between American military personnel and female German POWs. Interviews with 42 such couples revealed remarkably durable unions. Only 7% ended in divorce, compared to the national average of 23% for marriages from the same period. Researchers identified shared experiences of war and displacement as binding factors that transcended national differences. These couples raised approximately 560 children who navigated dual cultural identities, creating second-generation reconciliation. The Millers' interview for this study, recorded on magnetic tape and preserved in university archives, captured their perspective after 27 years of marriage. James, then a regional insurance manager, reflected, "When people ask how we met, we just say, 'during the war,' and change the subject. Few would understand that humanity can emerge even between supposed enemies." Elsa, who had become an elementary school German language teacher, added, "The propaganda told us Americans were gangsters and savages. The propaganda told Americans we were all fanatical Nazis. We discovered people are just people. This lesson cost 60 million lives." Their children and grandchildren inherited a complex legacy. Their daughter married a German exchange student in 1976, returning to Munich and creating transatlantic family connections. Their son served in the US Army during the Vietnam era, stationed in West Germany alongside the children of his mother's former comrades. At family gatherings, stories flowed in mixed English and German, preserving memories of a time when the world fractured and then slowly reassembled. Historical reconciliation often occurs through official channels, treaties, reparations, diplomatic initiatives, but the most profound healing happens through human connections forged across divisions. The former Nachrichtenhelferin and her American guard, whose unlikely romance began in a POW camp, embodied the truth that peace isn't merely the absence of conflict, but the presence of genuine understanding. Their story, one among thousands similarly improbable, demonstrates how individual courage to transcend national enmity created foundations for collective reconciliation. Personal love, multiplied across countless relationships, gradually transformed former enemies into family, a transformation more enduring than any military victory.